My name is Sarah, and these days, I collaborate with my husband John at his family-run company. The enterprise, led by my father-in-law, Richard, is a small but inviting establishment employing about 6 individuals. Richard, a man of few words, seldom involves himself in the day-to-day operations of the company. Instead, John, poised to become the next president, works tirelessly, actively pursuing clients and securing new projects, demonstrating his dedication to the company's expansion. During significant projects, all the employees come together, creating a vibrant and enthusiastic atmosphere. I've been part of this spirited environment for the past 10 years, ever since I got married. However, my mother-in-law, Nancy, seems to harbor some discontent about my role. As I returned home early to prepare dinner while John remained at the office, Nancy, who had been part of the family business until our marriage, confronted me with disapproving words. "How long do you plan on clinging to our family business?" Nancy asked, her words laden with criticism. Nancy, who had looked forward to relaxation post-retirement, appeared to redirect her energy into scrutinizing my choices. In response, I tried to maintain composure, asking, "What do you mean by clinging?" Nancy retorted with a cutting tone, suggesting that I must have married John out of necessity and was now taking advantage of working in their company. Sighing inwardly, I realized that such accusations from her had become more frequent lately. When I got married, I willingly left my previous job to join John's family-run business. It was my decision, not a result of unemployment. However, Nancy seemed convinced of my incompetence at work. I attempted to explain, "Mom, it's not that I couldn't work elsewhere. I chose to join John's company." Her dismissive retort revealed her lack of understanding, as she believed she saw through my supposed hidden motives. The issues with my mother-in-law extended beyond words. Despite quitting her job with the promise of managing the household, she refused to contribute, leaving my father-in-law to repeatedly request her assistance with housework. Instead, she stubbornly insisted, "I've worked all my life. Now it's the daughter-in-law's turn to do the housework." Consequently, the responsibility often fell on me to prepare dinner, clean up after meals, and manage other household tasks. One sunny afternoon, mustering courage, I decided to address the domestic issue. "Nancy," I began hesitantly, "I've noticed the dishes often get left in the sink. It would be helpful if you could tidy up after your meals." My small request, however, triggered an angry response. She accused me of giving orders in her own house and questioned my right as a daughter-in-law to dictate her actions. Caught in this exhausting exchange, I realized that if I didn't start preparing dinner soon, we'd be eating much later than usual. Despite my internal frustrations, I managed to keep a composed exterior. "Mom, let's continue this conversation later," I suggested, attempting to diffuse the tension momentarily. Needing to focus on preparing dinner, as it seemed we would eat late tonight, Nancy finally retreated to the living room, leaving me alone with my thoughts amidst the clatter of cooking utensils. Both Richard and John were aware of Nancy's mistreatment towards me as their daughter-in-law, and they attempted to intervene whenever they witnessed it happening. However, their efforts seemed to have little effect. Each time they confronted the situation, their faces betrayed concern and frustration, a testament to their desire to foster harmony in our family dynamic. Ironically, whenever Richard and John scolded Nancy for her behavior, she redirected her anger towards me, becoming even more hostile and sharp with her words. Her usually kind and gentle demeanor twisted with disdain, her tone cutting deeper than before. Though I had never experienced physical violence, the emotional toll of Nancy's words was significant. Richard and John's support had been my solace, allowing me to somewhat overlook Nancy's harsh words. Until one unimaginable morning. Just after I had finished cleaning up from breakfast and was preparing to leave for work amidst the morning rush, Nancy exclaimed, "Oh my, what a mess they trash here!" And without warning, she doused my handbag with a bucket of water. I was stunned, a mixture of shock and anger rendering me speechless. "What are you doing, Nancy?" I managed to stutter out, my voice trembling with disbelief. Nancy's response was flippant, resembling that of a mischievous child. "Oh, was that your stuff? I thought it was just a big piece of trash." Her casual dismissal infuriated me. Even if you thought it was trash, who pours water on it? What kind of mindset is that? Now the carpet is all wet. What about the vacuum cleaner? My words were a jumble of anger and confusion as I frantically emptied the water-soaked contents of my bag, including documents I needed for work, onto the table. Nancy responded nonchalantly, her face calm, showing no signs of remorse or concern for my distress. "Because you don't need to go to work anymore." I was baffled. In our living room, bathed in morning light, I sat opposite Nancy, her expression colder and more resolute than usual. It was as if she had made a decision that would change everything. "Excuse me?" My response was laden with confusion and surprise. "You've been clinging to this house for 10 years, but finally I can get rid of you." Her words pierced my heart, her voice carrying a level of anger and determination I had never heard before. My mind reeled, and my heart filled with sorrow. "Getting rid of me?" I questioned, disbelief in my voice. Her words made me feel like an outsider in this family. "In fact, my daughter is joining the company, so we need you to leave. Today's your last day. Well, all you have to do today is bow your head to your father-in-law and John, apologizing for all the trouble you've caused." Her mocking laughter further wounded me. She was using my position at work to force me out. I had dedicated years to that job, building respect and memories. I was dumbfounded. My heart was filled with disbelief at her merciless decision. I had devoted myself to this family, but it seemed my sacrifices meant nothing to her. "Are you sure about this? Wasn't Jessica working in a clothing store in Manhattan?" My words reflected my confusion and apprehension. My job was more than just a source of income. It was my avenue for self-fulfillment. Meanwhile, Jessica, my sister-in-law, seemed to have grown tired of city life and had chosen to return to the family. She said she was tired of dealing with the cold people of Manhattan. So I told her as she came back home, I have a job ready for her. She agreed to return immediately. "Now that she's coming back, I want you out of this house." Her words were difficult to comprehend. She was ready to upend my life with a single decision, completely disregarding my place in the family, without even listening to me. "I've written your resignation letter," she said, handing me an envelope. She effectively expelled me from the house. In that moment, my heart shattered completely. Everything I had built over the years was reduced to nothing, treated like a mere piece of paper. Her actions severed our family bond irreparably. I headed to the company, just a brisk 3-minute walk from my home, my mind a whirlwind of apprehension and anticipation. As I walked under the cool morning sky, each step felt heavy with the weight of what was to come. Upon reaching the office, I shared with my father-in-law Richard and my husband John. I relayed what my mother-in-law had said. Their faces were a mix of shock and thinly veiled anger, yet they remained composed. They suggested that maybe, just maybe, it was time for me to resign to show her the reality of the situation. This suggestion sent my heart into turmoil. Having worked tirelessly in our family-run business for years, I barely knew what a long vacation felt like, aside from brief respites during Thanksgiving and the holiday season. Encouraged by John and Richard's gentle words, "Why don't you spread your wings for a change?" I made up my mind to embark on a little trip. As I packed, I found myself pondering deeply about my life, my choices, and what lay ahead. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law Jessica, who had come to replace me at the company, shockingly didn't show up until 1:00 p.m. Her irresponsible attitude left John and Richard, who had been holding the fort in my absence, in a state of dismay. Jessica seemed utterly disinterested in understanding the work despite their attempts to explain it to her. Hearing about this, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of anxiety about the future of our company, even as I looked forward to my trip. Departing without encountering my mother-in-law, I swiftly set off. During the trip, as I enjoyed the view outside the train, I reflected on my life, the past, the present, and what was yet to come. Relishing the local seafood delicacies, I contemplated deeply about myself, my family, and our business. However, the tranquility of my fourth day was shattered when Jessica called me in tears. "What's going on?" Mom said it was an easy job, just sitting in a chair. But John and Dad are acting like I can't do anything right. Her words, most likely given to her by my mother-in-law, took me by surprise. Even as I enjoyed my leisure, I realized it was time to address the situation. "So, Jessica, how proficient are you with computers?" Hesitantly, she replied. "Well, I usually watch videos online and play games too." Her answer indicated her limited experience with technical aspects. Delving deeper, I asked about her familiarity with software tools such as Word or Excel, and her response was puzzled. Considering her background in the Manhattan apparel industry, it was unlikely that she never used a computer. Tasks such as tracking sales and managing inventory would have required her to use Excel. When asked if she could handle calculations for sales or fill in documents, she confidently answered, "I could handle that task." However, when probed further with, "Can you calculate tax too, right?" her confidence waned, and she responded uncertainly. This question was a test of her mathematical skills and her ability to apply them in a business context. While Jessica might possess other skills, it was apparent she felt insecure about the required skill set for the job. Her discomfort seemed particularly rooted in her struggle with calculations, which could be why she faced criticism from Richard and John. First and foremost, it was necessary to give my mother-in-law and her cohort, who tried to oust me, a taste of their own medicine. To begin with, since you're taking over my job, I expect you to handle the accounting tasks efficiently. Be mindful of email etiquette. A casual tone suitable for friends is utterly inappropriate for business communication. Also, you'll be responsible for scheduling the staff shifts. Though our team is small, everyone's requests for time off are carefully considered, so make sure not to prioritize your own convenience over theirs. As I continued to list down my demands, I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the line. But I was told I wouldn't have to do anything. Why are there so many tasks? I didn't come back home for this. She abruptly ended the call. In the following 3 days, I decided to enjoy sightseeing in Manhattan, where Jessica had fled. From my experience, I learned that not everyone in Manhattan is cold-hearted. In fact, it seemed rarer to find people as cold-hearted as my mother-in-law and Jessica, who had conspired to drive me away. A week after leaving my job, I returned to my in-laws' house. Upon my arrival, Nancy, with her face flushed red, confronted me with a burst of anger. "How dare you make my daughter cry? You won't get away with this," Nancy exclaimed furiously, her eyes brimming with anger and misunderstanding. She made a move to grab me, but John and Richard quickly intervened. They tried to calm her down, but her anger seemed far from subsiding. John sighed deeply before speaking. "Jessica is crying because she was scolded for trying to boss around her employees, despite her inability to do anything right. It's not Sarah's fault. Besides, Sarah hasn't been here for a week, so there's no way she could have upset Jessica. Mother, you really need to stop these baseless accusations." John's voice was calm yet carried weight, trying to convey the facts and clear the misunderstanding. "But it's because of her. This woman is the reason for Jessica's suffering," Nancy retorted, her voice emotional, directing her baseless suspicions towards me. Her words lacked any foundation of truth. "Where is Jessica, by the way?" I asked, looking around the living room. But Jessica was nowhere to be seen, adding more mystery to the already puzzling situation. It doesn't matter to me that Nancy is upset about Jessica, but Jessica has no place to go since she terminated her lease in her Manhattan apartment. I thought she would be at her parents' house, but her absence raised questions. I pondered. John explained. "Jessica's locked herself in her room. She's been crying and saying she doesn't want to go to work anymore." It seemed like Jessica had run away from learning the job well. It was understandable that she would find it challenging, considering she lacked the skills to fill in for me. "You've been poisoning John and Richard against me, haven't you? If not, they wouldn't say the company ran better with me than with the incompetent Jessica," Nancy accused me vehemently. Her words were filled with long-standing misunderstandings and prejudices, leaving me utterly perplexed. She seemed to have always viewed me as an adversary, her words reflecting years of misconceptions. John let out a heavy sigh, his face showing weariness and frustration with the tangled web of emotions in this family. He had tried repeatedly to resolve the misunderstandings among family members, but his efforts seemed far from fruitful. "Mom," he began, trying once again to bring clarity to the situation. "I realize it might sound a bit unusual, but Sarah is truly exceptional at her work. She holds a certification in bookkeeping, and her secretarial skills are top-notch. Moreover, she has studied Spanish and even has experience studying abroad. When it comes to dealing with multiple languages at our company, Sarah is the one who handles everything," John explained with a sense of pride, and his mother Nancy looked utterly surprised. Nancy had assumed that I quit my job as soon as I joined the family, so she had no idea about my contributions and achievements at work. What? That sounds like something straight out of a TV drama. Actually, back in college, I was so focused on getting various certifications that I immersed myself in my studies, to the point where I hardly participated in clubs or had time for a romantic relationship. It was during this phase of my life that I met John, who visited my company for business. I inadvertently found myself sharing the story of how John and I first met. However, I realized that this wasn't what Nancy wanted to hear, so I steered the conversation back to the original topic. In a nutshell, I was entrusted with a wide array of responsibilities at the company, from handling accounting tasks to schedule coordination, liaising with other companies, and managing employee shifts. There were numerous tasks under my purview. Thanks to that, I was able to focus on reaching out to other companies for business deals. The work environment became much more comfortable compared to the times when you were around. "Mom," John added, leaving Nancy with her mouth agape in amazement. Just then, Richard, John's father, chimed in with a comment that took me by surprise. "We're going to shut down that company soon." Actually, Jessica made a big blunder. Despite being asked to prepare some documents, she decided to handle phone calls because it seemed more fun doing so. While John and I were away, she ended up behaving rudely to the person in charge from Company A. Of course, I got a call to confirm this. Hearing this, I was so shocked that I instinctively covered my mouth with my hand. "I can't believe Jessica would do something like that," I murmured. Filled with disbelief, the thought that Jessica's actions might lead to the downfall of our company flashed through my mind, filling me with dread. However, as I wallowed in these anxious thoughts, the story took an unexpected turn. When I explained the situation, they suggested it might be time to end the family business. We had mentioned this before, right? About being absorbed by another company. The president of Company A stepped forward, saying he was interested. This was an unexpected yet long hoped-for development. With a family-run business, there are limitations, and it's uncertain whether we could consistently acquire a stable customer base. That's why John had always been working hard in sales, trying to secure new clients. Being absorbed by a larger company could mean securing a steady customer base. The once uncertain future suddenly seemed to hold a glimmer of hope. However, this news brought relief only to me, John, and his father. John's mother suddenly opposed the idea, saying, "That's not acceptable. John must become the president. This company is ours, isn't it?" I was taken aback by the sudden change in the situation. It seemed that more than a stable future, Nancy was concerned about maintaining the status of being part of a company president's family, part of an executive family. "And you're telling me he's not going to be the president anymore? Absolutely not acceptable," exclaimed Nancy passionately. This commotion piqued the interest of Jessica, who was upstairs in her room, leaving her to come down to the living room to see what was happening. In response to the chaos started by Nancy, Richard spoke up with a calm but final statement. "I am divorcing you, so either way, you will no longer be part of this executive family. Not only have you not changed your attitude towards my wife, but you also neglect household chores. To top it off, You spend your days out with young men instead of being home. I have no intention of supporting such a wife any longer." This was news to both me and John. We were so shocked that we could only stare at Sarah's father-in-law with wide eyes. It seemed he had planned to discuss divorce from the beginning, as he took out divorce papers and a photo of Nancy with a young man from the living room shelf, placing them on the table. "If you sign the divorce papers now and leave with your belongings, I won't demand alimony. I know getting any money from you would be futile anyway." "So unfair. Divorce? How can you say that? Haven't I devoted myself to this house all these years? Have you done any proper housework in these last 10 years? Have you ever helped with the business? Does spending someone else's money on young men count as devotion to the house?" It was the first time we saw Sarah's usually mild-mannered and reserved father-in-law this angry. Seeing this, Jessica, who had come down to the living room, was visibly trembling from the shock. "Jessica, you're part of this too. You came back home because you couldn't make it in Manhattan, and now you can't find a job but still act all high and mighty. In the end, you stopped working entirely. Whose escapism did you inherit? It's time for you to leave this house." Next, we saw Jessica's shock and resistance. She believed she was an important member of the family, but the reality was different. "Wait a minute, Dad. Mom might be a lost cause, but I'm your precious daughter, right?" The family conflict deepened as Jessica asserted her place, revealing her betrayal towards her mother. "Jessica, are you betraying Mom now?" Nancy was astounded, feeling betrayed by her daughter at the last moment. However, as the two started to create a commotion, he sternly silenced them with a shout. "If I just kick you out, it'll cause trouble for everyone, so I've asked an acquaintance to take you in. They'll be here soon to pick you up. Get your minimum belongings ready." Left with no choice but to obey, Nancy began packing her belongings with Jessica. After writing the divorce notice, then an acquaintance of the stepfather arrived to take Nancy and Jessica away. The person who came to pick them up was running a factory with dormitories, and it seemed they would be working there. John, Richard, and I talked to the employees about the company being absorbed and prepared for the busy days ahead for our future. Finally, I found out I was pregnant at that time. When I told the president of Company A, he was delighted and promised to send someone to replace me, which was a huge relief. Currently, John and Richard are working even harder for the sake of our upcoming child.